families were lied to. He bought the whole system.
How do you stand up to a man who has got a list of presidents in his pocket?
Just continue to watch Emmanuel TV.
TB Joshua preaches forgiveness, he doesn't forgive. They shot at the back of the vehicle. Bah, 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 bah. He sent them to kill me.
Threatened to kill me. Everywhere I turned to was like war.
It would not be abnormal for people to think that if I want to please him, if I want to be on his good side, seeing that he's a person in power, I'd be tempted to do one or two things that make him seem even bigger than he is.
True.
But that's the thing. What I'm trying to say is, nobody can be told how to love or how to respect or how to show, all these, how to honor somebody. He is not necessary. He might not have instilled that in them in maybe his teaching or his way of living. People are people. People just wake up one morning and they decide this is how we want to run the show. And
no.
It's possible. It's very possible.
Think about it, Benedict. You can. People tend to imitate. It goes back to what Chris is talking about. Even if I don't say it, explicitly, implicitly it is so. Like, think about ethos, right? Every institution has an ethos. By ethos, I mean that unconscious way of behaving or way of acting. Mm-hmm. Go to any institution and just stand and analyze people. You will see that everyone obeys a certain rule without being told.
It's the culture.
That's the ethos, yes. That's the culture of that very place. You don't need to be told, to say, okay, you should behave in this way, act in this way, but this man implicitly suggests so.
That's the thing. I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what you understand. So if I'm speaking this or I'm acting this and you understand the opposite, it's not my fault, it's on you. You see? It's on you. I will maybe, because we've only watched one video. We don't know what goes down in that church or whatever it is. We don't know. So we can't conclude and say, no, in his way of teaching, in his way of, behaving, he has empowered them to treat him the way that they're treating him. There's a possibility that it's just the people who have, maybe he even went against it. He told them not to treat. It's possible. No, it's very possible.
No. Like,
it's very
if
possible.
he did really go against it, he would have said no when they presented the chair.
It's very possible. What I'm saying here is it's very possible.
Okay, it's very possible. Mm-hmm. But regardless, as I stated, this was just a trigger. Because as we've seen with every institution nowadays, okay, I don't want to touch on the whole aspect of church or whatever. But we've seen it has gone to that extent. Mm-hmm. Now, this is just what can I say? A mini representation of the overall picture. Yes. So now, going back to what Jonathan said, it is your responsibility as a leader to tell your followers, no, don't do this. Mm-hmm. No, don't do this. This man was happy. Look at that. He was smiling.
And and that's a very good point. I like the point that you made, right? It's your responsibility. I mean, as much as you say something, how the next person interprets it is entirely up to them. Exactly. But this statement cannot be more applicable, especially when it comes to a situation of power. Because in that, right, in that situation, as a person in power, you must understand the influence that you have on people, okay? The influence that you have is not only reflected in how you act, but in the things you say as well. If you're a person of power and you're saying something, you must understand that it can be interpreted in many ways based off who you are. Mm-hmm. If I say an apple is red today, right, everyone's going to be like, an apple is red. But if I was the president and I'm saying an apple is red, it almost becomes gospel. Now you have no choice but to say an apple is red, based off the fact that I'm the one in power saying that. So I could have hinted to you that I want special treatment, and then you're like, oh, he needs special treatment, and then boom, here comes the chair, here comes the entourage, here comes all these fancy things, or whatever it is. Because that man didn't look like he was complaining.
That man was not complaining.
Nah.
He was happy. And this is not the first time I'm seeing someone being lifted off the chair. There's another video of this man preaching on top of a chair. And people are carrying him around.
I've seen homies standing on dudes' backs and doing backflips and crazy things. And it tells you that the power dynamic is so messed up that there's widespread abuse of power, right? Not only in a religious setup, but then in many different social setups, in the home, relationships, whatever it is.
Okay, I think let's not jump into calling it abuse of power, because earlier on, I don't know, one of you guys mentioned culture.
Yeah.
Like every institution has its culture.
True.
So we can't come here and stand to say that no, let's say for example, I run a church, for example, and in my church the culture is for me to preach standing on top of people's backs. Example, just an example. Okay. And the people who are in the church are okay with it. They are completely fine.
Okay.
So every time I'm about to preach, they just come there and they lay down and I go on top of them and I preach. That is the culture of the church. It's not against them. So you can't call it abuse. What is abuse? It's me taking advantage of you. You know, I am taking advantage of you. You haven't consented to me doing a certain thing to you. So that is when it's called abuse. But if it's our culture and you walk in and we explain to you that, hey, listen, here, you need to lay down for me to preach on top of you. And you say, yes, I agree. How am I abusing
that's not
you?
abuse.
I'm not abusing you. You've agreed.
Wouldn't it still be abuse, like from a psychological level?
No,
Because
I didn't coerce you into agreeing. I explained to you, it's A, B, C, D. Are you in or out? No, I'm in. You are in.
yes,
Okay,
but
fine. Then
you
do
need
this.
to look at this, right? Because when we're speaking of abuse, right, it's not something that always happens automatically. It's not just, quick. Sometimes it might be something that is built up through time, as I think Patrick or Chris mentioned it, that, ideas are being brought up. It's not just expressed explicitly, but probably implicitly as well. So, say for example, it's something he's been doing, toying on the emotions of the people time over time, and eventually they've learned to accept it. It's not as though, he suggested it and they were just like, okay, here we go. Maybe he hinted it bit by bit, and eventually, he suggested it and they received it and they began to act out of it.
If you're leaning into it from that perspective, then it's something completely different. Because
So you
I'm talking
wouldn't call
about
it
culture.
abuse?
I'm talking about culture.
Culture can
When
be built
a culture,
through abuse as well.
no, I
You
don't.
can
I
build culture
disagree
through
with
abuse.
that. I disagree with that.
I agree with him.
I
You can
disagree with
actually
that.
build a culture
Through abuse. How
This is
so?
why I'll back this up by looking at the basic construct of civilization, right? If you look at how you get passing of culture from one civilization to another, best example, colonialism, right? How did we adopt Western civilization? The colonizer wasn't like, hey guys, this is how we do things. Are you?
It wasn't a suggestion.
out.
It wasn't a suggestion. Think about it.
It was quite literally enforced on a lot of people, right? Like, this is how we're gonna do things from now on. You're in, and they're like, oh, you're in. Like, yeah, you're in. And that's just how it is. And from that, you see a whole culture being brought up. So it's possible, like, you can get culture that is based on an abusive relationship, an abuse of power, even as it stands. Not to like completely discredit your point. Who knows? That could have been the culture at the church,
Exactly.
right? Where
Thank
everyone
you.
is so submissive that they feel that in this man,
honor
because
him.
we hold him in such high regard,
He
we will
deserves this.
do all sorts of things for him. But my drawback on that is, if you feel at any point that you need to give someone so much reverence that it takes away your dignity, for me, I raise a red flag and I say that is abuse of power.
But that's the thing. Dignity is relative.
Dignity is relative.
Yes,
Also,
very relative. Just how do I put this?